Now, the Pentagon says 2 high-profile ISIL-K members were killed in a drone strike in eastern Afghanistan. The Taliban has since told Reuters they should have been informed of the move first and that 3 others were also injured. Now, that attack followed Thursday's bomb attack at Kabul airport that was claimed by the group. It killed at least 175 people, including 13 American service members.
I am not going to talk about specific capabilities ISIS may have lost in this strike. They lost a planner and they lost a facilitator, and they've got 1 wounded. And the fact that 2 of these individuals are no longer walking on the face of the earth, that's a good thing. It's a good thing for the people of Afghanistan. It's a good thing for our troops and our forces at that airfield. And I think I'm just going to leave it there.
Well, the U.S. is now one of the last countries still evacuating Afghan civilians trying to flee after the Taliban takeover. The U.K., meanwhile, says its final flight for civilians has now left Kabul. That means hundreds of Afghans eligible to fly to the U.K. will be left behind. Now, for Afghans who didn't manage to leave or who decided to stay, life is getting more challenging. Hundreds, as you can see, gathered outside a bank in Kabul after failing to withdraw cash. Many civil servants say they haven't been paid in months.
It's almost 10 days that I've been waiting here to get my salary. I am an employee of the government. We have a patient at home. We have our problems. We cannot take our salaries out. A few days ago, the banks reopened, but are closed again. Give us our salaries so that we can be able to solve our problems.
Well, the Taliban has yet to announce the makeup of its caretaker government, but it has just appointed governors and police chiefs in 33 of Afghanistan's 34 provinces. Rob McBride is across the latest for us from Kabul.
You do get a real sense that at the airport that finally we are getting into the end game of what has been a very long and often chaotic and traumatic process, this whole evacuation exercise. The surest signs of that are coming with the Taliban now taking over a lot of the guarding duties from the US military. This is a process that began Friday evening with the US in agreement with the Taliban withdrawing from some of the guard posts on the outer perimeter and withdrawing from some of their guard duties inside the airport, and those jobs now being taken over by the Taliban themselves as the US reduce the size of their perimeter in preparation for the final withdrawal of the final boots on the ground, if you like. It is not meant that people are staying away from the airport. You do get a feeling that a lot of people by now will have given up hope of getting onto a flight, that they will have realized that it is fairly hopeless. But as flights are still going for others, it will probably make it even a more desperate quest to try to get onto some of these last remaining flights. But we do know from the noises of aircraft going overhead and so on, though we are seeing fewer flights now arriving, fewer flights departing as we're getting closer to this deadline for the end of this evacuation.
Well, Rob Reynolds is in Washington, D.C. with more on what the Pentagon is saying about those ISIL-K targets being claimed by the U.S. military.
While he described the 2 individuals who were killed by this drone strike and 1 who was injured as high-profile members of ISIL-K, he would not commit to saying that they were in any way behind the planning of the deadly attack on the Kabul air base, Kabul airport, that killed 13 U.S. service members and many Afghans, over 170 Afghans. He would not say that, he would not go that far. So we don't know at this point officially whether these individuals were involved in planning that or whether they were more or less targets of opportunity that the U.S. was able to identify through intelligence of various types and then unleash the drone strike against them. Some other items that we learned from this, Kirby saying that there is an active and dynamic threat at the airport in Kabul, that the U.S. Forces there are aware of this and are taking every step they can to prevent any further attacks, to prevent loss of life. He also said that the U.S. will continue, well, General Taylor said the U.S. will continue to control the airport right up until the 31st of August, which he indicated was still the end date for the operation of removing Afghans and American citizens.
Well, Glenn Carl is a former Deputy National Intelligence Officer for Transnational Threats at the CIA. And he says intelligence gathering in Afghanistan can still be done, but it will now be more difficult.
There are multiple kinds of intelligence that are used to form assessments. It's called all source intelligence collection. So you'll have satellites, you'll have radio transmission intercepts, you'll have traffic analysis, literally studying the movement of vehicles and people. And then what we all think of, you have human sources. The advantage that human sources have is that humans are best at providing plans and intentions of your target, the group or individual you're seeking to understand and learn about. And that will be harder to obtain now. Access to Afghanistan will be much more difficult. So if you can't get access, then you can't cultivate sources or interpret people's actions. But it can still be done. Now, will we work more closely with or rely on the Pakistanis? That I would not say. There has been a troubled relationship between the United States and Pakistan for decades. And I anticipate that the relations will deteriorate. This is what's happened in Afghanistan is a triumph for the Pakistani intelligence service, and the failure of our American and Western hopes. So, yes, the U.S. and the U.K. and everybody else will, as they are able, work with the Pakistanis. But I don't expect that the Pakistanis will provide anything except what they think will help them, which is not the same as what we want.
Well, meanwhile, British troops have now stopped evacuating Afghans from Kabul. But the head of the UK's armed forces says hundreds of people entitled to resettlement in the UK will be left behind.
I'm afraid it's absolutely heartbreaking that we can't bring everybody out. And I think that point's been made very strongly, certainly by the Defence Secretary and others over the last 10 days or so. Personally, I've probably had over 100 messages from different Afghans who I know in my long association with the country. And many of those friends of mine won't make it out. And for me, not a day passes without me having a bit of a tear in my eye about all of that.
Well, Nadeem Baba is in London with the latest on the British evacuation operation in Afghanistan.
They said earlier on via the head of the armed forces that civilian evacuations were ending on Saturday, but now we've got it confirmed from the Ministry of Defence that the last flights purely for Afghan civilians to be evacuated out of Kabul and to the UK have actually taken off. There may be further flights in the day which do have a few Afghan civilians together with British diplomatic staff and British military personnel. So really, this is confirmation that things have moved to a new phase, that they are continuing to both assist people beyond next Tuesday who want to leave the country, but also to assist efforts in neighbouring countries to welcome refugees, people fleeing in fear for their lives into places like Iran and Pakistan. The British government say that nearly 15,000 people have been evacuated to the UK since mid-August, but they're, in the words of Nick Carter, the head of the armed forces, they've done a good job in the circumstances. Well, there are some criticisms that more than 1,000 people who worked for the British Armed Services are being left behind, and questions about exactly how much assistance can be provided to them right now.
Well, large numbers of Afghans are still crossing into neighbouring Pakistan. 20,000 people passed through the Chaman-Spin Boldak crossing on Saturday alone. Now, only those with Pakistani residency or people needing medical treatment are being allowed in. The UN Refugee Agency has warned 500,000 may flee Afghanistan in the coming months. Osama bin Javaid is at the Pakistan-Afghan border with this update.
On Pakistan's southern border with Afghanistan, thousands of people in the last 24 hours have tried to cross over. We're hearing reports that a lot of people from the northern parts of Afghanistan, because they cannot enter Pakistan from the north, are moving towards Kandahar, trying to cross the Spin Boulder crossing and seek refuge in Pakistan or take their onward journey from Pakistan. You have to bear in mind that there is a lot of people who are coming from provinces as far north as Ghazni, trying to come towards this border crossing and trying to enter Pakistan. Many of these people, we're being told, are the Hazaras, the ethnic minority which has come under attack on various occasions in Afghanistan. Pakistani authorities, on the other hand, say they're allowing people to come in if they have valid paperwork. They can apply for a visa and get a visa from their functional embassy in Kabul. Besides that, they're not going to allow people to enter Pakistan. We've been seeing desperate scenes on the border here in the north as well, where people are pleading with the Pakistani officials with their paperwork, trying to come and enter Pakistan on humanitarian grounds, trying to seek medical help, trying to visit families, because you have to remember that on both sides of the divide there are people who have tribal and ethnic ties, and they say that the deteriorating security situation in Afghanistan is cause for concern and many just want to leave.
Now moving on, and Iraq is hosting a regional summit aimed at